I think that having a why, the reason why you do a podcast, is important. Go ahead and riff on this, Tim, because I think it's really important to having success, to your point.
My why is to speed the energy transition. I wasn't thinking strategically at the early phase about, up my network. That is the net result. I tremendously up my network and my personal brand.
What have you learned since you started moderating rooms in Clubhouse? What have you learned?
Well, I learned the most by watching other moderators and participating in rooms, and it's good, bad, ugly, right? And moderating in rooms is great unless nobody comes on stage, Mark, and I have had that. So Clubhouse is a great way to practice being a facilitator and to create a conversation.
Ladies and gentlemen, dogs and cats, welcome to the After Hours Entrepreneur. We're today joined by a special guest, student and client of mine, very successful in the clean energy business and host of the Clean Power Hour podcast, Tim Montague. What up?
Hey, Mark, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really great to see you. And just to give everyone a little bit of context as to what we do and why we do it and how we get to where we're at today, it's just about getting it out there. Right, Tim? You got to start putting your voice out there. You never know what you're going to hear. We actually met each other through Clubhouse, if I'm not mistaken, right?
We did. Power to social media, man.
So let's talk. And before we start talking about the Clean Power Hour and everything you're doing in the solar industry, Tim, I want to talk a little bit about how we met. Tell me about your first experience with Clubhouse. What was that like? Walk me through it.
Well, I didn't know about Clubhouse hardly at all. It was an invitation-only platform last year in 2020 when they launched, and I did not get an invitation. And then I went to Podcast Movement, which is a podcasters trade show gathering. There's all kinds of talks. There's a trade show. I was meeting my buddy Nico Johnson, who's an aspirational peer for me in the clean tech podcasting world. His podcast is called Suncast. He has a company called Suncast Media. He also came from the solar industry. So anyway, me and Nico were talking about working together, and it opened up a whole new world. And then I learned about Podcast Magazine. I met Steve Olsher, and that was like, all this stuff is happening on Clubhouse and anybody can go there. So boom, I come home and I dive into Clubhouse and Club Pod, of course, where you and I are both leaders now. And I was a kid in a candy store.
Yeah. And Clubhouse it's just such an amazing way of connecting with people, of sharing a real conversation. I feel like oftentimes on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, wherever, you name it, I'm living there. It feels like every interaction is just very cheap and quick. Whereas with a platform like Clubhouse, it feels like you can really get down to some interesting conversation. I mean, Tim, you mentioned that you're a Club Pod leader and you're hosting the Clean Power Hour event on Clubhouse weekly, right?
Yeah, I started a room for Steve Olsher called Advancing Clean Technology with the Power of Podcasting. I will be starting my own room with a more Clean Power Hour centric name under my own brand. But okay. I wanted to put my shoulder to the wheel for Club Pod and practice moderating. And you have to do a certain amount of moderating before you can really open up your own rooms on Clubhouse. It's a stepwise progression, which makes sense. And so I'm grateful to Club Pod for giving me a platform. And I've met so many wonderful people on Clubhouse. I'm now working with a coach that I met, Angel Hartwell, who is also an award-winning podcaster, coach and consultant. So check out Angel Hartwell. And I've gotten to know Steve Olsher a little bit and gotten to go into so many rooms. And there's rooms on sustainability and clean tech and funding for startups and all kinds of topics, right? If you have an interest, you can find a Clubhouse room on that topic.
Yeah, no doubt. And without going too far into the weeds here, I think that the clean technology, the tech influencers, if you're into tech and kind of this new exciting type of technological world that we're growing out, Clubhouse is a great space. There's, like you said, a lot of VC capital going in there. It just feels very kind of like young and hip and new, which I think is pretty interesting. Now, one of the things that you had mentioned, Tim, and listen, I think that everybody should be playing with Clubhouse. I could go super deep on why I think that's the case, but moderating your own rooms, Tim, is huge. It's absolutely huge. And I'm kind of curious because I kind of co-moderated with you a couple rooms as well to give you a cadence to get you moving. But what have you learned since you started moderating rooms in Clubhouse? What have you learned?
Well, I learned the most by watching other moderators and participating in rooms, and it's good, bad, ugly, right? There are some really great rooms and great moderators. And then there's some rooms where it's just a very cliquish space where there's a group of people that know each other and want to hang out and talk to each other, but don't let anybody else up on stage or anybody else have a word in edgewise. But moderating is not new to me. So, I've been a speaker, trainer, coach, consultant for many, many years. And so I love working with people, having dialogue. And of course, the interview is the format. Well, on my show, we do interviews and we do news roundups. So anyway, moderating in rooms is great unless nobody comes on stage, Mark. And I have had that. I was moderating a room on hydrogen and the electrification of the economy the other night with a wonderful CEO of a company called Ally Power. His name is Joe Alfred. I'm a staunch believer in hydrogen as a way to store clean energy. You take solar energy, water, and you split the water into hydrogen and oxygen with electricity made from the solar energy. It's very simple and it's super clean. And then you can use that hydrogen in a fuel cell to run an electric bus, to power a power plant, to power a factory that makes steel even. So hydrogen is super powerful. It is what the sun is made of. So if you doubt the power of hydrogen, just look up in the sky. Don't stare at it because it'll make you blind. That's how powerful it is. So Clubhouse is a great way to practice being a facilitator and to create a conversation. And what I've done now is I've started to invite other podcasters in the clean tech space to come into my room. I had Barry Cinnamon, who runs a show called The Energy Show, and he and I were just geeking out for 45 minutes. You were there for the first part of that, and we did have one audience member come up and ask some questions, and he had intelligent questions. But for the most part, it was just me, and it was almost like a podcast where I'm interviewing Barry, talking about solar and storage and electrification of transportation, and that was wonderful because that was a dream come true. He's a real OG, as I like to say, in the solar industry.
Well, I definitely think that co-moderating rooms, bringing on some other moderators to help is huge for a lot of reasons. It allows you to blast out the room, to reach more people, to really accentuate your cause, because every person that you bring into the room and comes on stage, well, guess what Clubhouse is going to do? It's going to tell their followers. And guess what? When they come in, you can kind of build some momentum here. Which is obviously really important. So one of the things I've actually done, Tim, because you highlighted an issue that I had run into in a couple rooms, because sometimes I'll host a room, it's like I can't keep people off the stage. You got dozens of people, they're raising their hand, everyone wants to come up on stage and ask a question. There's other times I'll host rooms where it's pretty quiet. It's me and a couple other moderators, maybe we're drinking our coffee, we're just having a nice time. But it's hard to really set an expectation up front. You just don't really know. So one of the things that I've started doing, again, on Clubhouse specifically, is I'll kind of have like a theme for the day, right? So today, for example, in your example, like today's theme is, I don't know, challenges to hydrogen, right? What kind of challenges do we have to overcome to make hydrogen a reality? Whether that's awareness, political, finances, whatever it looks like, right? And then when you start your themed room, you can actually start riffing because you're an expert in the topic, right, Tim? So you could just you have that topic and you can kind of riff for 10, 15, 20 minutes. And hopefully throughout the course of that time, you're bringing people on stage. But I'll tell you what, it can be kind of hard to riff for a long period of time. Have you ever noticed that? Or do you feel like your time as a podcaster and your expertise in the subject makes it feel more natural?
Yeah, it does get a little awkward sometimes if you don't have people on stage. I don't prepare a talk. I certainly am prepared to address certain topics, like my club pod room is advancing clean tech podcasting. So those two things. And I have been connecting with other podcasters in my space, and a lot of them don't even know about Clubhouse yet, Mark. That's the problem. Luckily, Nico does, but he's so busy that he's not very active on Clubhouse. And so unless your guests and co-mods have a following on Clubhouse, it's hard to build momentum. I had a great guest the other day, this week, Mike Casey. He's the president and founder of TigerCom, which is a clean tech marketing firm. Great guy. new to Clubhouse, right? And so we had a small room and we had a great conversation, but we didn't have a big enough room to get other kind of clean tech experts or podcasters in the room.
Yeah.
And so it was just me and Mike. And me and Mike can talk all day long, but then you get the me and Mike show and that has a limited purview, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple things here I actually want to talk about. So if you're keeping it on theme, like the other day, Cliff Ravenscraft came into a room and it was really just me, one of my co-moderators and Cliff just talking for about 45 minutes. And
Yep.
the theme of the day was consistency. So we just talked about different types of consistency, right? Consistency in length, schedule, quality, guests, consistency. So frequency. And I thought that was an interesting way to set that up. What about repurposing? Because this was actually a blunder I made. I wasn't actually recording this room. So what if you're hosting a Clubhouse room that nobody's in? You host the Clean Power Hour. What about repurposing episodes for the Clean Power Hour? Is that something that you're looking at doing as well?
Yeah, I want to record conversations on Clubhouse and utilize that content. I did have an amazing conversation with Barry Cinnamon. I didn't have my tech set up to record that conversation. And even this week, I did have the tech set up, but we weren't getting good sound through the soundboard. There's some nuances to using a soundboard to connect your phone. Clubhouse is a mobile only platform for all intents and purposes, and that has its challenges. So I'm looking forward to getting your help, Mark, honestly, to ramp up my technical capabilities, because I am going to have some wonderful conversations. Nico came into our hydrogen discussion with me and Joe. He was able to talk for a few minutes before he had to jump on the trampoline with his kids. It was 5 o'clock start, 6 o'clock Eastern time start room. So and that's, it is hard to it's hard to know the best time to host a room on a
Yeah.
particular topic. I have to say, I don't have that nut cracked. I noticed that a lot of people try doing evening rooms or very early morning rooms. I do a middle of the day room just because that's when I really know that I can do it. I know that I won't have a conflict, so to speak, but I don't know. I'm curious what you think about that. Like the timing, figuring out Clubhouse there, it's got its own little bells and whistles and nuances.
There's definitely a trick to it. And the way that I see it, Tim, too, is again, my focus is so much on repurposing, right? So, okay, so what if a YouTube video doesn't get a ton of views? That's cool. People listen to my podcast. Or if that doesn't work, then they can go to the Clubhouse rooms, right? So I don't, and that's me personally. I don't solely focus on one thing. I focus on how can I reach multiple people on multiple platforms. But the answer is, I think, trying out different things. And to give you something that's actually really tangible, this is, I think, a great tip for anyone who's just getting started on Clubhouse. It's find large clubs like Club Pod, just like you did, Tim.
Yep.
And talk with the leaders of these large clubs. See if you can host rooms for them, right? And then it'll give you an idea for what times work because you're working within the confines and the schedule of that club itself, right? And then what I've done is as I host rooms for other big clubs, as I bring on new followers, I'll invite them to join my clubs, the clubs that I run and I manage too. So that's a good way that you can give value to other club owners, reach new audience, and build your own network. So anyway, that's kind of the way that I would start out if I was just starting out new on Clubhouse. And frankly, I still do that to this day.
Yeah, it is like any form of social media. If you're going to be successful, you have to be dogmatic. You have to see this as a marathon. You basically have to throw away the keys and do it consistently for 2 years and not expect significant results. And I mean, that's a long time for a lot of people. And you see this in the podcasting world. A lot of podcasts will start, they'll do 5 to 10 episodes and then they die. They crash and burn because they just haven't figured out how to keep the momentum. I started my own podcast as a webinar. I had a live audience, and then I was building an email list, getting people to subscribe to the email list. And then I realized, interviews. I can get a subject matter expert on the show, talk about solar finance, talk about community solar, talk about solar technology, whatever. And that way I'm just bouncing questions. I know how to ask good questions. And I don't have to prepare a deck or a presentation. And that's why I then defaulted to the interview style. It's also a great way, ultimately, to network, meet new people. I leveled up my network big time, Mark, through my podcasting. I met CEOs, people like Jigar Shah, who's a serial entrepreneur in the solar industry. He's a venture capitalist. He's now a government official. He heads up the loan program for the DOE. He's deploying billions of dollars into the clean tech ecosystem. Super powerful influencer. He's been on my show twice. I never would
Wow.
have had the opportunity to talk to Jigar Shah if I didn't have a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely incredible the doors that having a podcast opens. And of course, you probably want to get connected to all the people that Tim's connected to, and you can do that by listening to the cleanpowerhour.com. Go to cleanpowerhour.com. What are you waiting for? Listen to Tim's show. And one of the things that's interesting, Tim, is you've mentioned, my network's growing and growing. You've dropped probably like 5, 6, 7 names just during the course of this show, which tells me that you're not just saying it, it's working. And was that the original reason why you started the show, was just to build your network, or did you have another why? And just to kind of contextualize this, I think that having a why, the reason why you do a podcast, is important. Because
Absolutely.
if you go ahead and riff on this, Tim, because I think it's really important to having success, to your point.
My why is to speed the energy transition. That's why I work in the solar industry, or now what we call the solar and storage industry, because batteries are an integral part of solar. You can capture that energy and use it when the sun's not shining. But really, beyond that, then I was thinking, okay, people in the Midwest don't really know what solar is. It's not like the coasts where electricity's expensive and solar has come. Like if you go to New Jersey or New York State or California or Arizona, you see a lot of solar panels on rooftops. It's not like that here in the Midwest. We have very cheap power, and solar is still relatively expensive. And we're not early adopters. I am, but in general, the Midwest is not an early adopter.
Right.
So I wanted to educate the business community. I worked for a commercial industrial solar installer, and so I'm just aiming for facility owners, CEOs, CFOs, COOs who might consider reducing their power bill, which is big for a big company, for a big operation like manufacturers that are running 24/7. They use a huge amount of power, and you can reduce your power bill by 50%, so they could save tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I would just give a presentation about that. How does solar work,
Yeah.
and how do you save money, and what are the incentives? We have new incentives in Illinois that make it pay back faster. And then got into having guests to dig into some niche topics like community solar, where you don't need to have solar on your own roof. You can participate in a solar project that's 10 miles from your house, but you're buying those electrons technically through what's called virtual net metering. And so it was coincidental. I wasn't thinking strategically at the early phase about, up my network, but that is the net result. I tremendously up my network and my personal brand, and of course the brand of Continental Energy Solutions, which is the company I was podcasting for at the time.
Well, I got to tell you what, one of the things I think, Tim, that's really interesting about your show and about hearing you talk about your why is the positioning of your show. And this is something that really doesn't get talked about enough. It's are you actually speaking to? Who is actually listening to your podcast? And being reasonable. And, we were talking about this the other day, Tim. Your show is not for everybody. There's some people that just don't care about clean power. They just don't care. For whatever reason. For whatever reason, they don't care. They're not interested. And if you try to design a show that's trying to speak to those people, you're just going to be, you're in for a nightmare, But I think that when you position your show in a way that says, I'm going to reach CEOs, I'm going to reach CFOs, I'm going to reach decision makers, and I'm going to explain to them the benefits of clean energy, that's a win. Because I got to be honest, as a business owner, and typically when I'm working with business owners, we care about one thing: time and money. If you're telling me it's going to save, the coastline 20, 30, 40 years from now, I'm like, someone will figure it out from a business perspective, right? So do you find that as you're hosting these shows, as you're reaching more people, you're finding more objections? And I'm kind of moving from A to B really quick. Are you finding more objections and then refining your messaging based on the objections? Like, what does the interaction actually look like when you're hosting your Clean Power Hour?
Yeah, it is certainly a process of refinement. You're constantly trying to figure out what your audience wants or needs. And honestly, when you don't have a big audience, that's very difficult. I don't have a big enough YouTube channel, for example, to get statistics about demographics. I do know that my audience skews male, it skews 18 to 45, but that's the tech audience, so to speak. I
Yeah.
have the same audience as Elon Musk. And I didn't get a lot of pushback about topics other than when I sold my Model Y Tesla. I got some hate mail about that because, hey, I'm a clean tech professional. I'm an advocate for the clean energy transition. I had a very good reason for going back to an ICE engine vehicle. I want to tow my camping trailer, and the range with Model Y just wasn't going to cut it when you're going to rural parts where there isn't a vast charging network.
Yeah.
I'm a few years away from getting back there probably. I mean, I have a deposit now on a Rivian, which is a pure electric truck with a 400-mile range, and it could work. So I'm considering that. It's going to cost me almost $100,000, so I don't know if I'm actually going to pull the trigger on it, but it's a beautiful truck. And so anyway, the audience is still a bit of a mystery. The thing that really, when I look back though, is finding better and better guests.
Mm.
And it's not that some of my early guests weren't wonderful, but now I'm getting some, CEOs of cutting edge tech companies that are really going to be laying the foundation for the future of the solar industry, and thought leaders like Becca Jones-Albertus. She heads up the Solar Energy Technologies Office at the DOE, the Department of Energy. She's a real person of influence in the government, and I love having those pivotal characters in my presence and on my show and part of my media presence. It just, there is a glow, right, on whoever's affiliated with you on stage. That's why people love taking selfies with famous people or athletes, right? There's a glow. It raises your brand. And I'm not a sycophant that way. I'm truly passionate for the energy transition, but more eyeballs is better on this topic. But it is a self-selecting audience that I have, right? I garner an audience of people who are either they know about it and want to go deeper, or they're curious.
Well, I got to say, Tim, to me, you're taking all the right steps. You're trying these new things. And I'm also curious, like, when you bring on one of these big guests that you've never spoken to before, because I remember the first time I brought a Super Bowl champion onto my podcast, The Awesome Dad Show. I had Trent Dilfer on The Awesome Dad Show, and Trent's someone I had watched for years
Yeah.
on the television. It was a
Yeah.
really cool moment, right? When you get on the screen, you start talking and chatting. And it's not who you know, or it's not what you know, it's who you know. And the more doors you open up, you just never know what's going to come next, which actually leads me to another good question, Tim. You've been rolling out the Clean Power Hour for some time now. We're building out the podcast. We're doing some really exciting stuff with the podcast too, by the way. So look out, ladies and gentlemen. Here it comes. But what are you excited for next when it comes to the Clean Power Hour? Like what's something that's really exciting? Like in not just 6 months down the road, but 5 years down the road. Like what's something that's coming down the pike?
Well, I want to highlight an upcoming show. My show's been on hiatus for the last 7 weeks. We're about to start recording again. I've got a fellow podcaster coming on the show. His name is Bill Nussey. He's a tech entrepreneur. He sold his software company to IBM. He became a venture capitalist. He was very, very successful. And then he decided, I'm going to put my shoulder to the clean tech wheel and help the 700 million people who don't have electricity get solar and batteries. And he has a podcast called Freeing Energy, where he talks about local energy, local energy meaning rooftop solar, community solar, access to solar for all age groups and class groups. No matter what your income level, you can get access. But he has a book coming out. And so I have an early release copy of that book by the same title, Freeing Energy. I don't know if it's available on Amazon yet, but check it out. If you just Google Freeing Energy, you'll find Bill Nussey. And so I'm super pumped to start having some people like Bill who are aspirational peers for me, and people that I just really appreciate what they're about. They're mission-driven entrepreneurs. And then we're going to mix it up. I have a co-host on the show. His name is John Weaver. I'm super grateful that John said yes when I invited him to co-host the show with me about a year and a half ago. He is a journalist for PV Magazine, which is one of the biggest industry magazines globally for the photovoltaic and clean tech industries. So he's an accomplished journalist, but he's also a solar installer. So he has real street cred in the clean energy industry. He's also a geek for technology. So he really geeks out on like solar panel technology and the bleeding edge technologies. And he was instrumental in bringing some of the pivotal guests, like we had the CEO of Cubic PV, which is developing this very, very high tech, multi technology PV. It's like rocket science for solar. And Frank Frank von Mierlo is his name. Frank von Mierlo, CEO of Cubic PV. You can look that up. So we're going to be doing more of those shows with entrepreneurs and CEOs. I'm really dedicated to that, especially in like the storage space. Storage is so important because the sun only shines for, 8 hours a day, right? And here in Illinois, really only 4 of those hours are really good hours for generating electricity. If you go to Arizona, you get 7 hours of really good electricity generating sunshine, right? Because you're further south and there's less moisture in the air. Really, moisture is the killer of photons. When you look at a map, it's like the northeast where it's humid, or the southeast. Even though there's a lot more radiation in a place like Florida, if you compare Florida to Arizona, Arizona gets more because Florida is also humid. Anyway, bringing more CEOs on and bringing more aspirational peers on to the show, but then also continuing our journey with me and John talking about the energy transition news. What's hot, what's not, what are we seeing? There's a lot going on in our industry. China right now is going through some major gyrations. They don't have enough power on their grid. They're shuttering factories that used to run 7 days a week, now running 2 days a week. Factories that make solar panels. And so we're going to have a shortage of solar panels globally, which means the price goes up, the availability goes down. And as they say, when China sneezes, we get a cold, right? It's a global economy. We're very connected to the Chinese economy and to the Southeast Asian economy. Everybody knows that there's supply chain issues. You're seeing the stories about the ports being backed up. Oh boy, this is a major thing for anybody who buys stuff like pipe and wire, glass, aluminum, copper,
iPhones.
iPhones, yeah. Right, there's a chip shortage, and now you can't buy a car. Like, right? You drive by the car lots are empty.
I have a friend who's trying to buy a Tesla. They're like 9 to 10 months out on their Tesla. I have another client who's been waiting for their Tesla for about 6 months now. So yeah, it's a weird time. But I do want to highlight something, Tim, that again, I think has kind of been a common theme throughout this episode. And it's not just the network that you're building, but it's this thing that John Lee Dumas said to me a few episodes ago. He said, if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And why I think that's interesting to me is you have you're playing a really great game. You're playing a really important game, right? And your why is very strong. You want to bring in you want to bring in and speed this clean energy transition, more solar, more hydrogen, more water. We haven't talked about nuclear. It's not my area of expertise, but there's a lot of different types of quote unquote clean energy. And there's going to be more new types of clean energy moving forward. But what you've identified, Tim, is that one of the best ways to speed up that transition is to be the host of the party. It's to be the middle where you're connecting CEOs with broadcasters, with people in Washington and all these powerful people together. And guess who's in the middle? Tim Montague and the Clean Power Hour. Because that's the place you positioned yourself to play the game. And I think it's a really smart move. Something that most people don't see. I don't know if you recognize that, but most people don't see it.
I definitely see myself as a connector and a catalyst. And I do that in all forms of my work. Like when I came to Fossler Solar, a little company up in Northern Illinois that is just going gangbusters now, we're breaking into the utility solar space. We're going to be installing solar farms that are 100 to 500 megawatts. These are 1,000-acre plus solar farms, really big projects, which I'm very excited about that space. I've worked in the smaller solar space, right, doing rooftop solar, and now I'm going to do big solar projects. But it's my network that I bring to bear when I show up there on the team, so to speak.
Right.
Solar is very much a team sport. I'm helping them find new vendors. these are contractors that drive piles, that install the solar panels, that do the wiring. They're electricians, they're craftspeople, tradespeople, suppliers. We're looking for 700 megawatts of solar panels. Well, I know people at Q Cells, which is a lovely solar panel maker. They're a Korean company. They have a factory in Georgia, a 2 megawatt factory in Georgia. So they're making panels here in America. So it's an American made product. What don't you love about that? But what's great is that, we're about to pass tariffs on a lot of Southeastern Asian solar products, and they're not going to be as impacted. So they're going to stand above the fray and be able to deliver when many other manufacturers are going to be in the lurch, and that's really going to be rough for my industry. But I wanted to go back to your question, Mark, about the future of the Clean Power Hour.
Yeah.
I'm so looking forward to working with you. We're just getting started, Mark, and
Yes.
really upping my game and making the show more professional, and then getting the show out there in other formats, in smaller formats, doing some shortcuts so that more people can get exposed, because this is a very important time. We're at a pivotal moment in human history where it is code red. The climate change is starting to kick our butt, and it will have catastrophic consequences. Will it be 5 years or 50 years? Nobody can say.
Yeah.
But mass migration, for example, is no fun. I'm fairly protected from, for example, hurricanes because I live here in Illinois. But if tens of thousands of people have to migrate from Texas to Illinois all of a sudden, that would be a crisis for me too. So there's really no escaping that. And most people want to say or think, well, we'll let the next generation deal with it. Well, that's my grandchildren, right? And I can't just foist the problem on them. I have to do what I can. I inherited a problem, but I have a fiduciary responsibility, I like to say, which is a little bit of an exotic term. But, we all have to try to leave the world a better place, and that's my part.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I love about humans is we've just created some really amazing things, and I know that some really amazing innovations and inventions are coming. And I really appreciate, Tim, what you're doing, being an action taker, being passionate, going out there, making it happen, connecting the dots. And I see it. I recognize it. Yeah, I appreciate it. And, it's funny. I was actually at my 20-year high school reunion a couple weeks ago, and a lot of people just kind of doing the same thing. Same thing. And people are looking at it. And this was actually interesting, too. I'll use this as a quick lesson before we move on to the overrated, underrated section of the show. But a lot of people said to me, Mark, I can see you're doing something online. What are you doing? What's that all about? And when they said that, I'm like, cool, they noticed. But at the back of my head, I'm thinking, I got to do a better job. Because if they have to ask me what I'm doing, there's a problem. Okay. And I just want to send out to everyone out there. If you have friends or family members that look at you and they're like, hey, Jimmy, hey, Jill, I see what you're doing. It looks cool. I just don't know what you're doing. That's a problem. Everyone should know exactly what you're doing as soon as they find you online. So I'm working on it. You're working on it. We're all working on it. And of course, Tim is solving bigger problems than that, and you can listen to it all. Go down on the Clean Power Hour. Go to thecleanpowerhour.com. Tim, you ready for the overrated, underrated section of the show?
I don't know. It sounds scary.
You should be scared. You should be very, very scared. No, it's actually not that serious, but it will be put on your permanent resume for the rest of your life. All right, cool. So overrated, underrated Zoom meetings.
I say underrated. Zoom has been a savior for me, honestly. During the pandemic, well, I was an early adopter. I started using Zoom for my podcast back in 2017. So I knew about Zoom, and it was a great platform. It's affordable, it works, it's easy to use, and it does what you need. And it gets you basically good sound quality and video quality. I'm a YouTube first podcaster. I know you're big on YouTube. I love it that you can create a recording and then multi-purpose it, right? It's video and audio if you have that broken out. And Zoom gives you those settings. But people are down on Zoom and they have Zoom fatigue, they say. And I get it. If you're in back-to-back meetings all day long, okay, I understand. But I gained so much contact through the computer screen when we were on lockdown that was a lifesaver for me. So I'm super grateful.
Yeah. Good. I'm with you there. It also prevents and saves gas and flights. These business folk don't have to fly.
Low carbon for sure.
Yeah. I would think, although it's a complicated topic, but we'll keep it moving. Tim, electric scooters, overrated, underrated?
It's so fascinating, these fads, right? My son and I were visiting a college in Indiana when he was looking at schools. He's now going to college in Norway, but we rented these little electric scooters that you could fly around on, and I have to say it was a lot of fun. But we weren't wearing helmets, and these things go fast, and
They go,
you know, you could ride on the sidewalk, and you could easily crash into people or crash and hurt yourself. So I'm not a huge fan, I have to say. I think
overrated.
they're a little overrated. And you see pushback, right? Some major cities are saying, yeah, you know what, we're not going to allow this.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
yeah.
anecdotally, my brother just tore his ACL on one of these electric scooters. So
Ouch. Sorry to
maybe
hear
going a little
that.
bit too fast. Yeah, I don't know. Overrated, underrated, smartwatches.
Oh, totally overrated. I have a smartphone. I don't want another screen that's distracting me and vibrating and telling me things. I stopped wearing a watch when I was in college. I just didn't like having that thing on my wrist. I did wear a watch as a kid because that was the coolest. I remember, loving getting that first Casio electronic watch and then being like dad, right? My dad always wore a watch. My grandpa wore a watch. It was like you're a man when you had a watch, but no more. No, no thanks.
Fair enough. And for when maybe I'm dating myself a little bit. I still make the millennial cut, by the way. But do you remember those calculator watches? Like, ooh, I wanted a calculator watch so bad because I could do math on my wrist. Like, boom. It
Yeah,
unfortunately did not come to
I
fruition.
do love the smartphone, and I am addicted to my smartphone. I do a lot of business and networking on my smartphone, though. Boy, that is some powerful tech. The smartphone in our hand is more powerful than the computers that took us to the moon back in the '60s. That's incredible, and it's about to get way, way more powerful. I just hope it doesn't come back to bite us.
Yeah, we're tech is going so quick, which is why everyone needs to have a show and start developing their media presence now. You have to start now. And the final question for you, Tim: if you had 10 seconds with yourself 10 years ago, what do you say?
I should have gotten into media sooner. I love doing podcasting and interviewing. I'm not a great writer. I come from a family of writers. Both my mom and dad are writers, and they're wonderful writers, just amazing. And I just struggle. But I'm a natural, I think. I don't. The jury's out, right? I don't have a famous podcast or a famous show yet. I really enjoy giving interviews. So if you're a podcaster and you're looking for an interview about the clean energy transition, call me. I love giving interviews.
And we'll put the contact info below. Tim, thank you for being here, my friend.
Thank you, Mark. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for watching Mark Savant Media. Here, we're going to help you create a better content in less time and turn that attention into income. If you love this video, you're going to love these videos here. Click the one. Me and my team specially selected this just for you. Click the link. Check out the video. I'll catch you here next time on Mark Savant Media. Peace.